As promised, here's my brief walkthrough of what we've done today and how to get your access token for the Spotify API. Let's have a quick look at the procedure. So Spotify have given us this nice infographic on the process. We have to first reach out to its authentication endpoint and provide it with our client ID and client secret, as well as a grant type, which in our case will be client credentials. That will be a dictionary that you pass in with your request, with your post request. That's not a GET request, which we are used to. And it returns you an access token, a dictionary of 3 items, one of which is the access token, and the other 2 are grant type and expiry time. So from that dictionary, we need to get that access token back and use that in every single request that we make further on to the web API. That's the web API for which you can see the documentation on this page. And so to create an app, you have to provide a name for it as well as a description, and simply say that you are going to use the web API with it. There's no need to use the iOS SDK or the Android SDK. That needs to be used when you are developing an app for those devices. So we've created our Spotify developer account, we have created a new app, and let's now look at the client ID and client secret, which will be the environment variables we will set. So if you just go to your account, dashboard, and create an app, so you created the app, click on it and go to settings, and here you can see your client ID and client secret. Don't share them with anyone on GitHub. I'll be deleting my project if I don't need this, so you will not be able to use those credentials. Make sure that your variables are stored in a .env file at the root of your repository. So that .env file is structured like this. You have your variable names in all caps, upper snake case, no spaces, and you might have to escape some characters with quotation marks, but that's not the case with our Spotify keys. Make sure you have created a gitignore file as well and followed the Python template for it, which allows you to ignore env.env files, which contain your secrets, as well as your virtual environments, which are just unwieldy folders with tens of thousands of files that we don't want to commit to GitHub. We just want to give the user the opportunity to recreate the environment as they see fit using a requirements.txt file. So let's now create a virtual environment that can be achieved with the following command: Python, whatever the version that you want to use, or it can just be Python -m for make a virtual environment called venv. So that will give us a folder on the left-hand side called venv. Let's do that now. And voila. So you can see that both the .env file, where we stored our credentials, and the venv folder are now grayed out, as opposed to gitignore files and the notebook files, as well as the auth file, which are green. That means that Git is not tracking those files. And if we just look at this, they are not being tracked by Git, not being saved, so you don't commit those to your repository. Now, next up, we have created the gitignore file, created the virtual environment. We have to install all the packages that we need because a virtual environment does not have anything pre-installed with it. You have to use a virtual environment for one particular project that doesn't overlap with anything else, so that there are no naming conflicts. If one function is named the same in 2 packages, you might run into naming conflicts. So we want to minimize the chance of that happening. How do we do this? We just go and pip install pandas requests, then python.env will allow us to read this env file and have access to those environment variables. within our script. So once that's done, we can check that those packages have indeed been installed by using pip list. You should have a rather short list of packages compared to the global one that you have, because this is a fresh installation and we only have the packages we've specified, as well as their dependencies, so packages they rely on. And in your README file, you will need to point the user to the requirements.txt file, which contains this exact list with the exact versions of packages and their names that you have in your project. So we can get this file by typing in pip freeze and piping that output to requirements.txt file. Requirements.txt file, like so. So you can see it's showing up here. And here you have the exact versions of packages that you are using. We've got pandas, as well as NumPy, which pandas relies on, python.env, and let's plot as well. So the next part of the flow will be to load your environment variables and authenticate with the Spotify API, get a token that we'll then be able to use further down the line. Let's have a look at the authentication script. Move this over here, auth.py. We import all the required modules like requests, os.env, and base64. Base64 will allow us to encode our credentials in a base64 format so that they're not exposed. We load all the environment variables and create a function for getting the token. The client ID will be os.getEnv Spotify client ID. If you've run this function here in line 7, you will be able to access the environment variables with this code, os.getEnv. Same thing for client secret. If they don't exist, we raise a value error and verify that the user has indeed input them in the env file. Provide the URL for authentication, that's accounts.spotify.com, API token, and the auth string is structured like this: client ID colon client secret. So we concatenate them together with a colon, then use a base64 encoding, then decode that into UTF-8s. The headers for our request will contain just one dictionary key, authorization, basic with a space, and we put that base64 string into the authorization key. Then data, the data dictionary contains ground type, client credentials, and we make a request for what we need. So this request is a post request, not a get request, which we're used to. A post request means you are transferring some data alongside your request. In this case, that's going to be our client ID and client secret, which are encoded in a base64 format. Then headers contain the authorization information and the grant type credentials dictionary as well. Now, ChatGPT gave us a slightly more verbose solution for this, but I like to unindent my code. So if there are some guard conditions, it's better if you start by inverting them, so making a not condition instead of if true. We say if not true, then we raise an exception. If the response is not okay, we failed to retrieve the token. If it is okay, we carry on to the next bit, that is assigning access token from the response dictionary. And we return an authorization dictionary with the bearer token, so bearer and space. Now, these two lines, if name equals main, basically mean that you can invoke the function from the terminal when you run this as a script, as opposed to when you import it from your notebooks. So the next step will be to go to your notebook, import all the required modules, and from auth import get token. Right, so this is the auth file. We import the get token function from it. The requests module is already imported, so there's no need for that, but just to be sure. pprint JSON and OS. OS will have the get env function. Now, let's load this in, see if it works. All is good, and the Spotify token will be a bearer token with this value. Do not ever, ever, ever leave this in your notebooks, and don't commit that to GitHub. So I'll just clear cell outputs and now comment this out. Actually, delete this altogether. We don't need this. Now, the last step would be to have a look at the Spotify web API. For example, I looked at the get album endpoint, and this is the endpoint. So the URL contains albums, and then it contains the ID of the album you want to get. In the request sample toggle, you can see a curl request that you can test out in the terminal, just like so, and see that it works. Yep, error 404 because the bearer token is obfuscated here with the ellipsis, but that should not be a problem for us. So you can simply copy this curl request and reinstate it using Python requests, right? So I've just copied this curl request and commented it out so that when I create my get album function, I have some context. So the URL for this endpoint will be the API endpoint, v1 albums, and then you pass in the album ID that you want to get. Then the response will be the result of a GET request. This time a GET request, not a POST request, because we are requesting information from the API. And test out the function with pprint get album and this ID, which we saw right here. So let's run this. And here we have a dictionary that's returned. Now, depending on your question, on your research question and how you formulate it, you will need to get multiple JSON files like this one, then store all of the raw JSON into in the data/raw directory, and read those data back in the next notebook, where you do the cleaning, save it to a database, and in notebook 3, you read the data back from the database, not from JSON files, and do your visualizations. So that's all. I hope that helps, and good luck with your summative.